Hola estudiantes de aprendizaje a distancia. Hoy hablamos de los verbos AR, los verbos AR. Aquí hay muchos verbos AR. Algunos probablemente sabes de español en grado 8. Do you recognize any of these from español de grado 8? Quizás bailar, cantar, la 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 la. Dibujar, escuchar, hablar, estudiar, mirar, practicar, trabajar. Hopefully some of these are familiar from 8th grade. You do have a list of all of these verbs on your yellow notes packet, the very top right on the first page of the yellow notes packet. Hoy hablamos de verbos AR. Nota, the verbs buscar, escuchar, esperar, mirar do not need to be followed by prepositions like they do in English. In Inglés, I'm looking for the homework. En español, busco la tarea. You don't need a word for for. In Inglés, I wait for the bus. En español, no es necesario. Espero el autobús. I wait for the bus. I listen to the music. Escucho la música. You don't need a word there for to. Miro la pizarra. I'm looking at the board. We don't need a word for at in este caso. You don't need to write this down necessarily, just FYI. Tenemos que repasar. Before we talk about conjugating verbs, we have to talk about pronouns. Pronouns, remember, replace a noun, the subject of the sentence, subject pronouns. Hay una canción. Yo is I, and tú is you, él and ella, he and she. Usted is you, more formally. Nosotros, nosotras, both mean we. Ustedes is y'all the southern way. Vosotros is y'all but just in Spain. Ellos and ellas both mean they. And that brings us back to yo, 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 yo. Let's talk about verbs. There are 3 kinds of verbs in Spanish. AR verbs, ER verbs, and, IR verbs. OR was a good guess, though. These are called infinitive verbs. It doesn't mean they're infinite necessarily. This is just a word we use to talk about grammar. Every verb in Spanish has a stem or a root. Sometimes it's called the root. I usually say the stem, followed by an ending. For example, the verb bailar means to dance. The stem is bail, and the ending in this case is ar. It's the infinitive ending. Another verb we might know is leer. Do you know the verb leer? Read. Leer means to read. The stem is le, and the ending is er. That's the infinitive ending. Another verb we might know is escribir. Does that sound familiar? To write, exactly. The stem is escrib. The ending is ir. So the stem tells you what the verb means, gives you the meaning, and the ending usually tells you who's doing the verb. In this case, these verbs have infinitive endings, and that's like the most basic type of verb, and nobody's doing the action. It's just to dance, to read, to write. So these AR, ER, IR endings kind of, in a sense, mean to, like in English. To read, to write, to dance. I know. To conjugate a verb. To conjugate a verb means conjugate means to change the ending of a verb to indicate who is doing the action. So we just talked about infinitive verbs ending with AR, ER, IR. Nobody's doing those actions. This AR, ER, IR ending basically means to dance, to read, to write. But if we want to say I dance, you read, he writes, we have to conjugate the verb. And we've already done this with the verb ser, soy, eres, es, somos, sois, son. And now we're going to learn how to do this conjugation with all AR verbs that follow the regular AR verb pattern. Does this sound familiar? Have you learned this before in 8th grade, perhaps? I see some nodding. That's okay. To conjugate a regular AR verb in the present tense, meaning we're talking about today, what we're doing right now. We're talking about what we often do, what we habitually do. First, drop the AR ending of the infinitive, and then add the following endings. So this is super important, these endings, and you might already know them. The ending for the yo form of AR verbs is the letter O. Ending for the to form of AR verbs is as. The usted, el, ella ending is a. The nosotros ending, amos. Vosotros, ais, with an accent mark on the A. The ustedes, ellos, ellas ending is an. So to conjugate a regular AR verb in the present tense, drop the AR from the infinitive verb and add the following endings. For example, if I wanted to say, I sing, the infinitive for to sing is cantar, but to specify I sing, or I usually sing, or I sing today, we would take off the AR ending and add the yo ending, which is canto. We could add the subject pronoun yo canto, or we could just say canto, because in Spanish, there's 6 different endings, so the ending of the verb tells you who's doing it without needing the subject pronoun yo. You could take it off. Bueno, I won't. Another example is, what's a good verb? Yo, if I wanted to say we listen, the verb for listen is escuchar. To say we listen, we take off the AR ending, and we add the ending for we. Which ending is that? Can you see it? Shout it if you know it. Amos. Nosotros amos. Escuchamos means we listen. And I could add nosotros or nosotras, but I don't necessarily need to because escuchamos means we listen, even if the nosotros isn't said. How are you feeling about this? Okay, I see some thumbs up. This is good. Pues, a few notes. When 2 verbs are used together with no change of subject, the second verb is generally not conjugated. Also, to make a sentence negative, we can add no before the conjugated verb. For example, deseo hablar means I want, deseo, desire, desear is the infinitive verb. Deseo hablar con el señor Diaz. I want to speak. Remember the AR, ER, IR ending is kind of like the word to in English. Deseo is conjugated. I want, I desire. To speak is not. Alicia doesn't want to dance now. Again, there's 2 verbs. Desea is conjugated. Bailar is not. And to make it negative, in English we add doesn't, don't, etc. But in Spanish you just add the word no before the conjugated verb. So the conjugated verb is desea. If you added the no right here, Alicia desea no bailar, it would sound funny in Spanish. The no goes before the conjugated verb. Bueno. Practicamos. Flip the page. I practico. I practica al revés. Enseñar, forma yo. The first step is always to remove the infinitive ending. Take off the AR, we're left with the stem enseñ, which indicates teach. And the yo ending for AR verbs is an O. Enseño means I teach. Está bien, escribe, por favor. Hablar, forma L. Take off the AR ending. You're left with the stem hablo, which refers to speak or talk. And the ending for L is habla. Let's move down a little bit. What about these? You teach. Enseñar is to teach. How about you teach? Enseñ is the stem. You informal? Which ending would that be? O, as, a, amos, ais, on? As. Excelente. Enseñas. She listens. Do you remember the infinitive verb to listen? Starts with an E. Escuchar is the infinitive. She listens. Would I add an A? Is that good? No, Josh, why are you shaking your head? Why is that not good? Excelente. I forgot to take off the AR ending. Escucha. She listens. Ella escucha. Chicos, por favor, toman 3 o 4 minutos, if you haven't already started. Take a stab at the other 8 on your own. 3 o 4 minutos. Flip back to that verb list if you need to. Flip back to the endings if you need to. Take a stab at it. Hola otra vez, chicos. Pues, did you try the last 8 on your own? Check your work. See how you did. Comprar forma tú, compras. You formal arrive, llega. It's the usted form. Cuidado, llega. Dibujar forma ellos, dibujan. We walk, caminamos. Estudiar forma nosotros, estudiamos. They take, toman. Ellas toman. Practicar forma ustedes, practican. I search for or I look for. If you couldn't find I search for, it's because on your list it says I look for. Busco. Busco. You can add the subject pronoun to all of these, but you don't necessarily need to because the endings tell us who's doing the action of the verb. Amos means we. O at the end of a verb means I. Bueno, adios.